How I Split on People. This is Radical Self-Respect with Jared Mello. I have an ebook and an audiobook by the same name. Those books are great for people that struggled with codependency, people-pleasing, boundaries, becoming more assertive, or maybe you've just had a breakup. It'd be great for any one of those people, so check it out. And thanks to everyone who's been liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing. It's been greatly appreciated. And please share my content with the same kinds of people I mentioned that would be helped by Radical Self-Respect, the book. So with that, I'm going to jump right in, though, and talk about how I split on people. Now, I've mentioned before I have some borderline tendencies, and I've gotten pretty good with all of them, except for this one, really. This one has kind of reared its ugly head over and over again, but it started as far back as when I was 12 years old, and I had friends at the time, and I didn't think they were cool anymore, so I decided to abandon them. Kind of an ass thing to do, I know. And I think how this all started in me was when I was a kid, having boundaries, having my own autonomy was not acceptable. It was seen as a betrayal. It was seen like an abandonment. And this is something that narcissistic and borderline parents, it's what they do. They don't really respect boundaries. They don't want their kids to be autonomous. They have to adhere. They have to adhere to the cult of the family. They have to adhere to exactly what's going on. And if you don't, you're abandoning them or you're betraying them. And so how it portrays itself in my life today is it can happen with men or women both. So it's not just romantic relationships this happens with friendships too. But it almost always begins when I'm getting smothered by somebody and they're starting to crowd me with too many text messages or too many phone calls. And then just the sight of their name on my phone will begin to repulse me. And my skin will begin to crawl. And I'll be like, ugh, I just need to get as far away from this person as possible. And the more effort that other person does to try to change my mind, the less likely I am to change my mind. It is something that I need to get space. I need to get far away from that person. And when I'm ready, then I can begin to see that person again in a positive light. But if that person's overcrowding, that person's bombarding me with messages and they're smothering me, it only makes it worse. And it only makes it so that I don't want to talk to them longer. Now, like I said, I've done this with guy friends and in romantic relationships. It's tougher in romantic relationships because it's hard to get that space in a romantic relationship. And to preface, not all people do I split on. Certain people, they're a little more socially calibrated and they're a little more intuitive about the needs of people. So they know instinctively to not crowd or to not smother and bombard with text messages. So it's 1,000 times less likely I'll split on those kinds of people. But when someone starts wanting too much from me, wanting too much of my attention or time, that's when this splitting thing happens to me, where I'll be like, uh-oh. It probably reminds me of that situation when I was a child, when I wasn't allowed to have boundaries, I wasn't allowed to be autonomous, and it brings up that old wound, and it comes to today. And I know rationally it shouldn't always be that way, but this is what I've learned about it. I've learned I got to accept myself. And through acceptance, I am more likely to change, as opposed to really trying to work hard on my defects. And I know this because, like when I used to go to self-help programs, we had these like self-help books and step working guides that would talk about, okay, you got to work on your defects. And so I'd really work hard on my defects only to discover that they actually got worse. The more I worked on them, the more apparent they seemed to be. And I realized acceptance is the key. Acceptance is the key to change. And so I understand myself now that I sometimes get like this. I sometimes feel smothered and I want space from people. And it's a little more acceptable in guy friendships than it is in romantic relationships, but I accept it. And if you're out there and say you're the borderline or narcissistic person that splits, I'd say accept it about yourself. Don't fight it, just accept it. And how we're going to communicate our boundary in regards to this is everything. It's an art. Communicating boundaries in a healthy way is like an art. Because some people, though, are going to be a little more dense and they're not going to get it. So I try to do, like, need space. I'll show it with my actions first. I'll try to text less, more time in between responses, and that takes care of it for most people. But some people, though, you got to be a little more blatant and say, hey, I just need a little space. And how they take that, if you say it in a calm and cool way, that's on them. And some people are going to need you to do that because they're just not going to get it. So it is what it is. And I know it's difficult to do that when we have that skin crawling, repulsed feeling about somebody, the all black or the all white. And again, I understand rationally it doesn't always make sense. But at the same time, sometimes we do just need space. Even healthy people, completely healthy people who are very well adjusted, they still may need space. They still might need time away from people, and it's completely okay. And so I recognize it might be a little more pronounced in me, but I accept it. I accept that sometimes I need space. Sometimes I just need to not talk to somebody. And the people who are going to be in my life, they're going to have to understand that. And this just is what it is. And this is not to say that this is not the kind of splitting where you notice that someone is actually just not good for you, period. Where someone may be trying to constantly pull you down or constantly pick at you like the way a narcissistic type person would. It's completely normal to not want to be around those people. I don't even consider that splitting. I consider it splitting when someone just is being friendly even, and they just try to get a little too close. They try to smother, and they're not really socially calibrated enough to realize, hey, this person doesn't want to hear from me right now. This person needs some space. And so that's where this splitting thing comes into play. And so I recognize it from both sides. If you're the partner of someone who does this, just understand it has less to do with you and everything to do with us. And so the only way through it, though, is to give them that space. Give them that space, and eventually, if they really care about you, they'll come back around, and it could be like nothing happened. And if you're a friend of someone who does this, then hey, space, you're probably not living together anyway, so it's just a fact of life. It may happen. And so I get both sides of it. It can be stressful. But if you are the person who splits, just accept it about yourself that, hey, sometimes that's what we need to do for self-care. That's what we need to do to practice radical self-respect, to have a little space from somebody, be on our own, and then we come back when we're ready. So if you have experiences with splitting like this, comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And regardless of what side of it you are you on the side that you are the splitter, or are you the person being splitted on? I'd like to hear both sides because I think it can be very informative for everyone to hear. So with that, thank you very much for watching and have a great rest of your day.